September 9, 2018. The Practice of Uncertainty. Reverend Gwen Myer Ethelbah. Given at Unity of Payson, Arizona.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll add just a little bit to Gaia's presentation about me. I'm an ordained Unity minister. And if you want to talk about the creative process, I was driving along the road one day and had a call to ministry. And my first thought was, God, don't you mean the car behind me? And it's been an interesting road during which I met Gaia. I've met several of you. I recognize Marianne. There are two faces here that I sort of know and I don't know, and surprises because it's been a while. It's been like 3 years. And it's been a very creative process because when I went off to seminary, I did not know what was beyond it. I mean, God said, go to seminary. God didn't say anything about the rest of it. And so I guess my most frequent prayer all through seminary was, okay, God, give me a clue. Anytime would be good. And what it turned out to be, because I already had a career as a professional artist, was that I was going to hold both. And I didn't know that until I was a few years into this process and understood that they both feed off of each other. Not because art is a creative expression, but because as you are doing it, your mind isn't on the words and the thinking. Your mind is in a different place. And God speaks to you in those places. I did retain my habits as a voracious reader. I still do. And it's always great fun to put together all of the thoughts and thinkings that go into this. Because ministry, standing up here, is a verbal process. Art is an unverbal process for the most part. And trying to bring the two of them together is when it all really works, whether it's the painting or the talk. Now this morning, I'm going to be talking with you about the practice of uncertainty. And I took this title from a wonderful book by Mark Nepo, The Endless Practice, Becoming Who You Were Born to Be. And he says, within each of us is a spirit that knows from birth how to say yes and not question that yes. In some ways, the path of our spirit is that of a hawk. It doesn't need to pay attention to roads or terrains. It simply flies to the heart of the matter. But the life we live is human, and we can't escape the weight of feet and legs and arms. We can't fly like a hawk, so we need to break trail and follow paths. We need to stop and cut down limbs when they block our way. We need to accept when we've made a wrong turn. And what he is talking about is the uncertainty of living. The fact that we don't know when that truck is going to come barreling through the intersection and maybe wipe out somebody. Or, my goodness, here is a beautiful child that we hadn't expected. Or all of the joys and all of the fears that come in a daily life with us. And so when we talk about the practice of uncertainty, practice itself denotes uncertainty, that perhaps all of the perfection we are inside might not be how life turns out. If you're like me, this is probably not very comforting. I can tell you that most of the time I have really wanted to know what was around that next corner. And sometimes I had a hint and sometimes I didn't. But I want the universe to be predictable and comfortable. I want the security of knowing. And And so I listen to laws. And as you know, in Unity, in New Thought, and especially in New Age, there are a lot of laws. And let's take a moment and look at how some of these laws came about. And I'm going to be challenging you a little bit today, maybe a lot. When Charles Fillmore came to the spiritual understandings, this was in the last half or the last quarter of the 19th century. And that century was all about finding the laws of life, the laws of nature, the laws of science. And he wanted to find all the laws of spirituality. And that was his focus. Now, how many of you have read Charles Fillmore? Okay, then you know, very didactic. This is the law about this, and this is the law about that. And those laws are wonderful. They're marvelous. But perhaps when we think about things like what you think brings it about, I'm looking at a room full of people, including myself, that probably wouldn't be here if everybody's thought turned into reality right then and there. We wouldn't have made it past our teenage years. So when we're thinking about these laws, maybe we want to hold them a little gently and find out where they apply and use them as a guide instead of cutting off the opportunity to be uncertain. Because we still have this dual nature. We are spiritual beings living this temporal existence. And the temporal existence and the spirituality within us doesn't always mesh. And so finding ways to deal with this, finding how to live with uncertainty is a very important principle. What does the practice of uncertainty bring us? Well, right off the bat, it brings us the gift of allowing things to be as they are. How can we deal with something if we have this blinder on that says, I will only think good thoughts? I will only do what I said this morning in my affirmations. I'm not going to listen to everything else. We can't deal with stuff if we do that. Now, practice is an interesting concept in itself because when we practice, we experience stuff. We try things on. We practice this allowing in a way that gives us a chance to try it again. That's what practice is. You don't just do the scales once. You do them a lot and a lot and a lot. Practice doesn't mean no commitment to the results. Rather, commitment is to what we are practicing. Pablo Casals said when he was in his last few years of his life and he was still practicing several hours a day, and somebody asked him why he was doing that, and he said, well, I think I'm finally getting somewhere. We get to try and sometimes go in a new direction. As an artist, and I'm not thinking conscious thoughts beyond, let's see, I'm supposed to be putting in my darks, and then I put in a color and it's not quite what I intended. And sometimes it's, oh, why did I do that? But often it's, oh, well, that works there. And maybe go in a different direction. In art, in painting, in the way of spirituality too, it comes in through us and goes to that human mind. But what comes out the fingers and the hands and the spirit may be totally different. If we weren't perfect, if we were perfect, I should say, we shouldn't have to practice, right? Is anybody here that perfect in our daily life? We're perfect inside, but we're not perfect in dealing with what's around us. By practicing allowing uncertainty, we gain confidence that we can enjoy a measure of success. We've worked for it, we've earned it, and we can accept it. If it were preordained, what's the big deal? But it isn't preordained, and that's what life is about. I think uncertainty itself is a tremendous gift to each of us. It allows us to entertain those what-ifs. It allows us to learn instead of prescribing what's going to happen. And that's where the magic lies. It allows life to surprise us in beautiful, wonderful, and sometimes not so hot ways. And one of the biggest things is that it allows us, as we allow uncertainty to happen, we get the opportunity to hear God's voice and direction over all of the clamor of what I should be doing. I've got to be doing this, I've got to be doing this. You set that aside, and now you can hear the presence of God within you. If everything is preordained, you can't do that. And it allows for that creativity. That is the acceptance of that voice within us saying do this versus that. Or that little stroke of color. Oh. It allows for grace. Uncertainty allows for grace and for God's grace to come and make something better that might not have been so good. Uncertainty. It's amazing that I'd be standing here talking to you about, oh, okay, just kind of let everything go and, let it come back to you in whatever hobbledy-gobbledy fashion it's going to. But that's how life is. It allows for success, not as a pre-planned event. Uncertainty is what happens when you are mindful, when you go through life being aware. And I'm not saying here that you shouldn't be doing affirmations and denials. Those are really critical for helping to guide us. But there always comes a time when you have to listen to life, because it's also through life that God speaks. Now, one of the interesting things that happens when you're a circuit minister like I am, and you drive distances to get to where you go, is you step out with this, and on the way, you change what you're going to say. If that isn't a good example of the principle of uncertainty, I don't know. And I find that at this juncture, what I want to do is help you with some guideposts into how to deal with uncertainty. How to deal with, for instance, sometimes the results aren't so good. And I'm going to reach from Pema Chodron, the American Buddhist nun, and her 3 principles for dealing with things like this. They are practice, precision. Precision, looking directly at what it is that's bothering you. Loving kindness, understanding that you and whatever other people are involved in a situation are doing the best you can at that moment with what you've got. So it's a kind of a self-forgiveness, as well as a forgiveness of those around you. And I can tell you, those two together have taken me through some gates I never even knew were there, but had to go through. And then the last part is letting go. Or, as it should be, deciding what is mine to do and letting the rest go. Those are such important principles, and I can tell you personally that as somebody who went through an abusive marriage, who went through early childhood of being bullied and beaten, that at the end of that road, it was no longer, by going through those steps and by going back and looking exactly at what the feelings were, untangling them, seeing how far back they went in me, where were things like this I'd heard before, I actually came to a point where it wasn't that self-confidence was a daily battle, but I won more often. It was, the battle wasn't even there. I can't begin to tell you how important it is to embrace what's happening to you, whether you like it or you don't, and going back through those steps. And this is one of the great joys of seminary. We had about a third of our curriculum. I was next to the last year of the 3-year curriculum. About a third of it was these psychological things that happened. Because we didn't want our students, we didn't want our ministers out there not knowing what their stuff was. Or letting it out in front of the congregation. I've let out mine as a history lesson, but I'm no longer buried under it. So these important things can only happen when you accept uncertainty, when you live with uncertainty. Opportunity and uncertainty don't promise a destination or relief from the discomfort of being who we are. And AA has a wonderful saying about that, which is, wherever we go, there we are. And it captures a lot of that. Practicing uncertainty can lead you to opportunities that you didn't know were there. They promise, though, above all, a fresh start, a redo, or perhaps another chance simply to stretch ourselves beyond what we wanted to be and become something, a different version of ourselves than what we know. I know Gaia has a different version than I knew her 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 4. And so does everyone else in this room. You right now are at the apex of your life. Everything that you have done in your life, every thought that you've had, has led you to be right here, right now. And what a blessing that is. And so it is. Thank you.